Hi, my name is Lisa Yates, and I'm the Director of Disability Support Services at Moreno Valley College. Also, I've recently completed my PhD dissertation that explored the disability perceptions of college stakeholders. So, how we think about disabilities is very much in the forefront of my mind right now. A lot of educators wonder why we're seeing increasing numbers of students who manage disabilities in college, so I find it's helpful to share a little history. This is one of the ugly laws that many cities legally enforced well into the 1970s. Be it enacted that on or after the passage of this act, it shall be unlawful for any person whose body is deformed, mutilated, imperfect, or has been reduced by amputations, or who is idiotic or imbecile, to exhibit him or herself in any public hall, museum, theater, or any public building, tent, booth, or public place. And whosoever shall exhibit such mental or physical deformity or mutilation shall be sentenced to pay a fine not exceeding $1,000 or suffer imprisonment not exceeding 6 months or both in the discretion of the court. City of New York, 1895. Ugly laws meant that even individuals who were simply perceived to have some type of handicap couldn't have a job or go to restaurants or even beg for money on the street. And these restrictions extended to educational programs. Then, in 1973, disability rights activists organized a march on Washington. Thousands of people with canes and wheelchairs and support animals descended on Washington, with some leaving their wheelchairs to literally crawl up the steps of Congress. There were no wheelchair ramps back then, but they did so to lobby for basic human rights. Their fight for access and protection added civil rights language about disabilities to the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, allowing access to federally funded programs, which included public education, educational materials, and educational technology. Recognizing that protecting basic rights was not enough, the 1990 Americans with Disabilities Act, signed by President George H.W. Bush, mandated physical access to businesses and made it illegal for businesses to discriminate against hiring individuals with disabilities, and stipulated that businesses should provide reasonable accommodations to support those individuals in the workplace. Title V of the California Education Code articulated guidelines for anti-discrimination in education related to disabilities, and the Americans with Disabilities Amendment Act of 2008 broadened the definition of disability and extended legal access and protection to private businesses and schools that are used by the public. But our Disability Support Services Department seeks to evolve from a 20th century model of equal access to a 21st century model that includes those civil rights protections, but is further motivated by global efforts to equitize opportunities for individuals with disabilities. In 2006 and 2016, the United Nations issued an imperative to governments, communities, and schools to improve the lives of individuals with disabilities. And we know that higher education can empower individuals to improve their own lives. Also, according to the World Health Organization, disability is part of being human because an estimated 1.3 billion people, about 16% of the global population, experiences significant disabilities. And almost everyone will temporarily or permanently experience disability at some point in their life. In addition, the California Community College Chancellor's Office has mandated that community colleges should work to equitize success outcomes for historically underrepresented students, like students with disabilities. My disability philosophy is framed by a radical redefinition of disability proposed by Tom Shakespeare, who identifies as disabled. Shakespeare describes disability as one of the many types of human predicaments that individuals face in life. Predicaments are challenging situations that human beings may wish to minimize but cannot avoid. These unavoidable situations have to be managed while also living our lives, like financial trouble and divorce. In this view, disabilities are human predicaments that impact the body and or the mind, like pregnancy. It's both a body and mind predicament, exciting at first, but then comes the morning sickness and the stress about the impending birthday. The expectant mother has to manage both the body and mind challenges while still working, going to school, taking care of her other children, etc. Similarly, for the last 25 years, I've been managing fibromyalgia. It's a body predicament that at times presents with chronic pain and insomnia resulting in brain fog. As a college student myself, I've had to manage symptoms that cause some degree of cognitive interference, but I push through because that's what human beings do when faced with a predicament. Body-mind predicaments exist in all people groups in all cultures and include wide variations of severity, frequency of flare-ups, triggers, and degree of cognitive interference. And as such, they should be considered a natural part of human diversity. I agree with Shakespeare that individuals with disabilities have a diagnosable condition that can present as a functional impairment at times. However, they manage their symptoms, thoughts, and medications within environments that are structured for people perceived to be normal. So I use the phrase body-mind predicament as a reminder that predicaments are normal to the lived experiences of every human being. Some body-mind predicaments are more commonly found in certain people groups, like people of color and diabetes, the elderly and arthritis, or football players and concussion disorder. And some of these predicaments increase the likelihood of depression. But because predicaments cross all ages, races, genders, socioeconomic classes, and cultures, disability scholars believe that our predicaments unite us as human beings, or at least they should. I've been chewing on this for a while now, wondering why don't body-mind predicaments unite us across diversities instead of further marginalizing individuals within diverse groups? The idea of disability as diversity is a fairly new concept. The California Community College Chancellor's Office just this year added an A for accessibility to its DEI framework. And I applaud the inclusion, but part of me wonders, why should disability be given a separate category from diversity? Race, gender, class, language, they're not given an initial all their own. So why is disability? Also, adding an A at the end of the acronym confirms the position that disability is often given in conversations about diversity and equity. It usually goes something like race, gender, class, language, ability. This is a common discussion among my colleagues in the disability field, and sadly, individuals who manage disabilities are used to being an afterthought in conversations about diversity and equity. So in preparing for this summit, I found myself digging deep to figure out why this is so. Negative perceptions about difference are hidden within our culture's collective unconsciousness, and difference has a prefix of die. The root word die comes from the Greek meaning two or double, and the Latin meaning apart, as in divide and divorce. And versity means a collection of varieties. So breaking that down, die, meaning two or apart, suggests that there are two parts of a whole. When we divide, we separate a whole into two parts. Dialogue is two people sharing one topic of conversation, and divorce separates one marriage or one couple into two singles. So thinking about race, there's this whole of humanity divided into two parts, one part being a collection of racial varieties, so people of color on one side, and on the other side, is whiteness. If we think about diversity in terms of gender, we have the whole of humanity divided into two parts. Until recent history, this division had men on one side and women on the other, with women representing the diverse variety and men being the norm. But thanks to the work of LGBTQ activists, some of us are validating gender diversity. So those who identify as LGBTQ have joined the women as diverse, but on the other side, we have heterosexual men. So we see a pattern. Generally speaking, diversity is measured against a standard of normalcy that has been conceived, contrived, and counted by highly educated or wealthy white heterosexual males. Disability has the root word dis, and dis means opposite and not, as in disagreement, disloyal, disable. We don't say die-able, which would indicate that people with body-mind predicaments are still one part of the whole spectrum of human ability, like racial diversity is still one collective part of the human race. We say dis, meaning not or opposite, communicating that this population's abilities are not part of the whole, or that their abilities exist in opposition to the whole spectrum of human abilities, like they don't share the ability spectrum with normal people. The medical model of disability measures function and capability and determines that body-mind predicaments inhabit a measurable distance from a standard or norm of expected behavior, performance, and function. But who sets that standard, and whom is that standard measured against? Since the time of Plato in Western culture, white heterosexual males have held all positions of power in government, education, science, and finance. They determined that physical agility, determination, strength, intelligence, rational thought, and definitions of success would be measured against themselves, perpetuating the myth of the self-made man and ignoring the privileges that allowed them to achieve and hold on to that status. In contrast, individuals who managed body-mind predicaments were considered to be broken, irrational, needy, dependent, less than, and even subhuman. These men also attached disability to their ideas of diversity. Women were unclean and prone to hysteria. LGBTQ were demon-possessed and exorcised. Enslaved African Americans were physically very strong, and so that they wouldn't challenge their enslavers' images of themselves, they were animalized or described as savage. And if they tried to escape their bondage, they were considered insane for wanting freedom. And the mass of humanity who lived in poverty were not intelligent enough to benefit from education. And yet, although disability exists in all marginalized groups, individuals who manage body-mind predicaments are often set apart within those diverse groups. In education, we're concerned with how body-mind predicaments impact academic success. Before arriving at MVC, I was a disability support counselor. I was also certified as an adult learning disability specialist, and I worked as a student success counselor. So the way other educators know English or math, I know learning. I know how people learn. And as a learning disability specialist, I was trained to measure IQ so that the IQ score could be compared to a student's academic achievement scores to determine if there was a significant discrepancy that suggested some type of learning disability. The intelligence quotient is considered to be organic. It's how the brain naturally processes information outside of exposure to education. But what I've learned from my training, research, and from the students I've assessed and advised is that how we measure IQ is flawed. And learning isn't just visual or auditory or kinesthetic. Learning is more diverse than that. I'd say it's multiverse. To determine IQ, we look at four main areas related to academic ability: verbal comprehension, perceptual reasoning, working memory, and processing speed. Each of these has an average range, and together they make up the full scale IQ. Also generated is the general ability score, which doesn't include the processing speed. So students whose full-scale IQ is between 85 and 115 are considered to be average learners, with 100 being the norm. But I've seen too many students perform far beyond what their IQ score said they should be able to. And research supports that there are flaws in how we measure intelligence, and many think that the flaw is related to the lack of diversity in the norming samples. And this is problematic because researchers and educators rely on data that's derived from standardized instruments to measure ability and success. Historically, these instruments were created to weed out non-white, non-male, and non-disabled individuals in an effort to confirm preconceived notions about white male superiority. The tests were constructed using the science of eugenics. So IQ tests impose standards that intellectually marginalized large segments of humanity. Currently, instruments are normed using more diverse populations. However, they typically don't seek out individuals with diagnosed body-mind predicaments to include in their norming sample. Emerging studies of intelligence and learning are taking a nonlinear approach to intelligence, viewing cognition as one of the markers of human diversity. But our current understanding of intelligence is psychometrically understood to be linear. Students whose measured IQ falls within the bell curve of normal do well in college because they resemble what Dan Goodley calls the species typical student for whom higher education was built. That means that higher education, as it's been traditionally structured, can only serve to penalize the cognitive diversity that's been present in every classroom since the day its institutions extended opportunities to diverse people groups. But the emerging view, in part due to critical race theory and critical feminist theory and disability studies in education, is that intellectual ability is yet another marker of human diversity. And neuroscience imaging supports this theory as it reveals that human brains are more unique than fingerprints. So academic challenges are just an indicator of the neurodiversity already existing in every college classroom. Because each brain is unique, we're all neurodiverse. Only some of us are marginalized because of it. And some students in our cognitive diversity spectrum process information similarly to that species typical learner. And teachers like to work with them because they learn the way teachers want to teach. And so they're compatible with the traditionally paced pedagogy and practices, which were designed for that species typical student, but not designed for historically underrepresented students. Disability studies in education are challenging the linear view of intelligence and posing a spectrum of abilities. Based on my training, research, and experience working with diverse students with and without body-mind predicaments, including honor students, veterans, and intersectionally marginalized students, I've been developing an alternative model of intelligence based on a cognitive diversity spectrum. I'd like you to consider the overlap of internal abilities and external factors that are typical in human beings and which may affect accuracy when measuring intelligence and determining grades. These factors combined suggest a need to reimagine intelligence measurement. For instance, a high level of confidence influences comfort with risk. Students confident in their mathematical ability will risk asking questions and get answers to increase their knowledge and their aptitude for math. Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences theory posits that individuals are not born with all the intelligences they'll ever have, and current neuroscience research is supporting that theory. Gardner proposed that along with linguistic, spatial, logical, and kinesthetic intelligences, students can call upon interpersonal, musical, and other abilities to assist them in areas that are underdeveloped. But these are also influenced by how much natural curiosity and or interest the student has in the subject area. When learning content, if a student is managing verbal comprehension challenges, they can call upon their perceptual reasoning skills for support and vice versa. And a teacher who understands this can utilize universally designed learning and instruction to create equitable learning activities. A lot of emphasis is placed on motivation. If students are motivated, they'll show up and they'll do the work and they'll push through. But according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, motivation works best when physical and emotional needs are met. Similarly, having a growth mindset is supposed to be the key, but developing a growth mindset doesn't come easily to students who have experienced ridicule, belittling, shaming, and impatience when learning new concepts. Working memory and processing speed are the engines that drive learning in fast-paced, ableist college classrooms. And teachers who move quickly from one topic to another without checking for understanding, or who refuse to share their notes for students to refer to later, don't support students with challenges in these areas. And on IQ test day, a brain's natural strengths may work less efficiently if it's distracted by predicaments like hunger and stress and chronic fatigue and financial troubles. Contrary to conventional understanding, intelligence is not fixed, and I'm theorizing that it also can't be linear because strengths and weaknesses, along with human predicaments, fluctuate within the intelligence spectrum and impact IQ testing. You can pull out any one of these and consider how each of the other internal influences might overlap to positively or negatively impact performance. In school, even if a student has an I can do anything attitude, but has working memory challenges, or the subject matter is presented in a boring, unrelatable way, that distracted brain may not process the information in a timely manner and not complete the in-class assignment fluidly, and so not succeed in revealing their understanding. On the other hand, someone with low confidence, but whose life experience has made them more comfortable with risk, may use those experiences to support their low confidence and ask the questions they need to get answers to. And there are also external influences on intelligence. Institutional mindset allocates the resources needed to create a climate that fosters academic and personal growth. Is the institution simply complying with the ADA, or do they view students with body-mind predicaments as an integral part of the institution's success? Do they even expect success from this student population? Related to inclusion, is the department centrally located with other student services departments, or is it located on the periphery of the college? Educational philosophers Catherine Macaulay and Nell Noddings championed benevolent education and ethics of care. Both emphasized education's non-academic contributions to society, which can also help to produce well-rounded thinkers and caring citizens. They were the forerunners of DEIA, and institutions that consider students with body-mind predicaments as part of the diversity and equity initiatives will create a sense of belonging where this student population can thrive. What is the instructor's preconceptions about teaching students with body-mind predicaments, and how much do they prefer that species-typical student? How flexible is their approach to pedagogy, and what's their understanding about ability and intelligence? And do they think accommodations give students an unfair advantage, or do they resent the students because their learning diversity requires more work from them as educators? How were the students' challenges supported in K through 12? Did the school's zip code mean that resources were severely limited? Were they pulled out or mainstreamed? Were compensatory strategies explained to them, or were they just applied? Did the IEP team meet consistently, and how were the meetings structured? Did they talk over the student? Did the parents understand what was happening during the meeting? And how supportive is the family? Are they first generation students, or do they have parents in the home at all? Do the parents value higher education or see it as something that interferes with the real work they should be doing? Are the parents' expectations too low or too high for the student? In compliance with the law, college disability support services are the first step toward achieving success for students with disabilities, but accommodations that focus on supporting deficits can be stigmatizing, and a lot of students who have a history of special education don't seek out disability support in college, which means there are a lot of students who are managing body-mind predicaments in college classrooms who are not registered with our department. Recent studies have shown that it's the in-class support from disability-friendly instructors that have made the most impact on success outcomes for students with body-mind predicaments. Students said they appreciated the academic support and advocacy they received from DSS, but they pointed to how instructors taught, how instructors treated them, and how available they were as making the most difference. But studies also reveal that instructors don't feel equipped to offer in-class support due to lack of training and disability disclosure issues. And these studies reveal common misunderstandings and assumptions about disabilities, measured intelligence, and capability. Colleagues from outside of our department often say to us, "Thank you for what you do serving the student population." And I get what they mean. They recognize that it takes a certain skill set sprinkled with compassion and patience to help students succeed who they may perceive as not fitting into that species typical student mold. But really, all we do is create a welcoming environment where students with body-mind predicaments feel comfortable sharing their challenges, their history of being othered, and their concerns about learning in one-size-fits-all environments. And then during the intake, we examine their documentation and listen to what they say so we can figure out what they need so they can do their best work. That's it. We welcome them so they feel comfortable to share their difficulties. We discuss their documentation. We listen to what they say without judgment to determine what they need so they can do their best work. Isn't that what all educators should do? Welcome, listen, strategize, and provide what they need to do their best work. And isn't that why we chose to work in education? To help students do their best work? So in closing, I'd like you to consider two things. The first is based on that idea of intelligence as spectral, a simple visual reminder. It's this, a pinwheel. Picture it spinning round and round with different strengths adapting to support the challenges within the individual, ebbing and flowing from day to day, merging and branching off, but with each challenge supported by a newly developed strength. Abilities overlapping within each learner, with each neurodiverse brain working together in the classroom. The second thought is a quote from my verbally comprehensive colleagues. In her book, 5 Dimensions of Quality, Linda Suski articulates that if we want to foster a college culture of betterment, we need to focus and aspire to learn what we do not know, cannot see, and have not tried. We need to measure the effectiveness of what we do try. And we need to collaborate with others who have relevant experience and knowledge that we may be missing. Let's collaborate. Thank you.